Over the past few months, I've been learning as much about front end software development as I can. I finally got into React and had to pick a project. I decided to work on a financial planner. I'm recently married and a fairly new developer at a company that's to be unnamed for both my privacy and their own. And with all these life changes, budgeting, money management, taxes, and other financial topics have become more interesting to me. So I started working on a financial planner. When I started out, I was still really new to front end development, and I've recognized that the style of my application really doesn't fit a web development style, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to pull my hair out and scream at a few rubber ducks in order to make it work. I started off by working on a mortgage calculator. This calculator takes in a little bit of user information and then displays a little bit of information about a mortgage. So the total cost of the mortgage, monthly payments, total interest paid over time. And then there's a little graphic that allows you to see the breakdown of your monthly housing expenses, including HOA, insurance, property tax, etc. So this is kind of where I started. As I was working on this, I ran into a handful of roadblocks. The management of my data and my style that I was using. I went through 5, 6, 7 different organization strategies, and eventually I came up with one that I felt worked really well for the mortgage calculator. Still, a lot of this code is not the cleanest, and there are areas where I would love to improve on this, but in the time that I took working on mortgage calculators, eventually it became too tedious, and sitting and working on the same project for as long as I did, I wanted to move on to another feature of my code. So I stored this in the back of my head where all important things belong, and I moved on to the tax calculator. In the future, I may come back to this, but for now, it works. It does what I want it to do, and that's really where I want to be right now. I want to use this project to be able to learn front-end development and other web ideas or web topics. So I did start working on a tax calculator. Similar to that mortgage calculator, it takes in a little bit of user input like salary, maybe additional income, so if you got a bonus that year, or maybe you worked a second job. Really all it does is adds these two numbers together and uses that as your total annual income. There's different deductions that it accepts. It allows for 2 different incomes. It takes the taxes for individual number 1, and it gives you an estimated tax return based on the withholdings that if you have monthly withholdings, so if you do like $500 a month for withholdings with an additional withholding of $2,500, maybe once a year, this is estimating that if you file single, you'll have this tax return, and if you change your filing status to maybe head of household, which should have a larger deduction, you would have a larger tax return. So this goes through and follows all this logic for the current 2020 tax brackets, and I do intend to keep updating those tax brackets as they're updated. It does that for both individuals, and right now it also calculates the total taxes for both incomes. There's a little bug in this one where this value is not correct. I did the math wrong, and I do still need to go in and update that value. But once again, I had spent a little bit of time on this. I had an idea that I really wanted to do, so I started coding, continuing on and on and on, and eventually I got to this point where I wanted to rework my code again. I felt that my code wasn't clean enough, that there were areas where I wanted to add new features, and my data configuration really didn't fit the new feature that I wanted to add. So I hit this roadblock, I took a little time off, and then eventually I came back and reworked it slightly, just enough to be able to get some features. The specific feature I wanted was these deductions. And eventually I got those back in, and it still isn't quite where I want it, but once again, I approached this as a code first, plan later. And I realized that this was not the way that you should go about a project, especially when learning a new language. That's where this series comes into play. I was doing this just to learn React and learn a little bit of front end development, but as time went on, I learned that my style of working on a project for personal use really didn't fit a smart project planning method. And I want to be able to document my growth as a developer and see what works and what doesn't by planning a little differently in each series and work on a few different projects so that I can grow. And anyone who watches these videos, they can take in some ideas that I have and leave ideas for other developers so that we can all improve our project workflow. So, this series is going to be about a budget manager. In my upcoming videos, I'm going to go over my plan for this project, everything that I've done, from the objects that I think I'm going to need, my data management, my the functions I'm going to need for modifying data and manipulating data, and really everything that went into my planning for this project. Beyond that, I'm going to go through each of those steps that I've discussed, and I'm going to go in depth and explain as I'm working on this project my thought process and why I'm doing something specifically, along with some of my debugging. So I really want this to be from a start to finish, everything that I go through when I'm working on a project. If this is a series that you really want to follow, please subscribe, and I hope that I can provide a series that's worthwhile to watch. And then please leave comments of any ideas you have for this channel, if you want to see something, or if you have any project workflow methodologies that work really well for you. I'd love to hear them, and anyone else who watches this video, it may help them as well when they're working on their own projects. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.